Hello, and welcome to One Spark Stories, the podcast where innovators, creators, and some unsuspecting risk takers share about navigating highs and lows, laughter and tears, and how sometimes all it takes is one spark of inspiration to find your way to happiness. This podcast will leave you inspired to take action on your own purpose as we connect, create, and celebrate unique sparks around the globe, once again proving that it is a small world after all. Today is a wonderfully empowering and insightful look into one woman's journey from corporate to keynotes. Karen Laos and I first crossed paths when we joined a Speaker Sisters network back in late 2019, early 2020, which, my gosh, does that not feel like a lifetime ago anymore? Over the years, I have had the honor of seeing Karen's incredible transformation as she has carved her own path as a keynote speaker and leadership coach, equipping women to stand out with unshakable confidence. She specializes in communication with executive presence and compelling messages. She does a beautiful job of sharing this in her book, Trust Your Own Voice, Growing Your Influence Through Confident Communication. Karen is quite possibly one of the biggest cheerleaders championing female business leaders to own their value and find their voice so they can be seen and heard. I mean, does this not sound like my kind of lady? She also works with teams to create cultures of trust and function at their best. And she has coached leaders at Facebook, Google, Netflix, Uber, Sephora, Sony, Microsoft, Fidelity, Schwab. I mean, goodness, I could go on and on. Karen's fun, encouraging, and results-oriented style is so evident today, especially when she shares about a no that she was able to turn into an even better offer, all involving Donald Miller, CEO of StoryBrand. Well, welcome, Karen. How are you today?
I am fabulous and looking forward to our conversation.
Likewise. It's so fun because we have been connected in a variety of ways, everywhere from our Speaker Sister Network with Jess Ekstrom. That has been, I know for myself, it's been life-changing in many ways. And I would hope that you've gotten the same value. But then we find out you have your podcast. It's Ignite Your Confidence, right?
Yes, that's
and
correct.
You just recently recorded with Donald Miller of StoryBrand. I mean, come on. And then you have connected with Larry Long Jr. Through NSA, National Speaker Association. This weird web. Larry's been on this podcast. Amazing guy. And Tim Schur, who was Donald Miller's former COO, he was just on. So it's only right that we keep this circle connected, right? I mean,
yes,
how cool is all that?
Amazing. Well, and I have to clarify too, that I was actually recorded on the Business Made Simple podcast.
Yes.
Yeah. So I would love one day for him to be on mine, but at this point I will be on his. So hopefully coming up in September.
That's an incredible experience. And for anybody that hasn't listened to that, I know as an entrepreneur, there are so many amazing questions that have been asked and insights. And so, I'm very excited to hear your conversation with him. And as much as he'll pull out the business side, I just want to know, Karen, I just want to know how you've gotten to be this incredible speaker and confidence coach, really, for women that are trying to find their voice. So could you give us a quick overview just of who you are and what you do?
Yes. Well, I typically like to start with the fact that I'm a follower of dreams. So something personal is that I'm originally from Minnesota, but I always had this dream to live in San Francisco. So I packed up my bags and threw a bunch of stuff in the trunk of my car for 3 weeks back in 1994 and drove cross country, landed in San Francisco and never left. So I've always had this adventurous spirit. So again, I didn't think it was that particularly adventurous, but the more that I live my life, the more people say, that's a little unusual. Like now fast forwarding to July 2020, when at 52 years old, I left my corporate job. And Again, I don't really think about things like people talk about this term midlife. I don't really connect with it because I'm like, who's saying what's the middle of my life? Like, I just feel like it is one adventure after the next. So I left my job, and I would say that for the 14 years prior is where I felt like I really grew up professionally, where what I mean by that is I really honed my craft around speaking and helping other people communicate with confidence. So that company helped me because what we did is we served corporate individuals and groups in how to come across with more influence in their communication through their presence. And so I've done a lot of recording on video for people to help them see how they come across. And then also the message, how to make a message compelling and memorable. So then when I left corporate, I will tell you the reason I left is to really put that stake in the ground around speaking specifically for women. And that's my real heart, is to help women, because frankly, for too long, I didn't have a voice. Well, I had one, I didn't use it. I didn't feel I was qualified, or I didn't feel I was good enough. I would say it's probably more good enough, because it's interesting. I've also had a lot of external confidence that my dad really instilled in me, but I still was always questioning, is this good enough? So I would hold back, and I want to help all women be free at the end of the day. And when I realized, I had a defining moment a few years ago, and that's when I really said, I'm so done with this. I am going to figure out the root problem and solve it. And then once I did, I realized I want to help other women do the same, because it feels so good to be free.
Oh my gosh. It's funny how you right there demonstrated the concept. I like to say, embracing the spark. There was that moment, there was that feeling, that thing that happened, and you said, I have to make a change. And I think there are many people that have experienced that. It's what we do with it that's going to either open or close that next door. And as a fellow dreamer, as that visionary, I saw for too long, I would do what was expected by somebody else, or I would accept the notion that I wasn't needing to speak up, or that I shouldn't in this scenario. And as a result, would watch myself missing opportunity after opportunity after opportunity to support and lead in ways I agreed with and aligned with me. And so, similar to that moment that you left corporate, I have made those adjustments where people go, are you serious? But those are the very moments that, as scary as it is, it's the most peaceful chaos that I could ever ask for. So I just think it's fantastic that you embraced it. Now I want to go way further back, and I want to talk about Karen as the kid, and think of you in that moment. I am very passionate about innovation, creativity, using your imagination. And so as a kid, was innovation, was creativity, was that something that you were really involved with or fascinated with? What type of kid was Karen?
Gosh, that's a profound question, Katie. I would say the sad answer is, it doesn't feel like I was, because I was so busy trying to be a compliant little girl. I was so busy trying to get my dad's approval and navigating that relationship. So I will say, and probably why I feel like I even value this feeling of freedom now so much, is that I didn't feel this freedom to just be myself. It was okay. And I come from a line of a very loving and yet also perfectionist mom. I love how she strove for excellence, but definitely that combo with my dad's criticism, you always feel like you can never do anything right, or it's got to be better. Nothing's just good enough as is.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting when I think about what I would say. What comes to mind is this moment where I was outside of this. Again, we had lived in a very middle class suburb in Minnesota, outside of Minneapolis. And I always wanted one of those banana seat bikes, and that had the little, I didn't get that, but I got the handlebars with the little streamers coming out.
Yeah.
And so in the spirit of creativity, you're bringing back a memory for me when I sang. I was by myself in the driveway, just almost pretending I was in a musical with the from the Wizard of Oz, the Somewhere Over the Rainbow song. I was singing that. So I always loved to sing. I grew up doing singing in choirs and that kind of thing. But I remember that moment because there was a tiny bit of feeling embarrassed, even though nobody was there. And yet it felt really good to just sing. And, I was kind of caressing the bike, like Somewhere Over the Rainbow.
You were in the moment.
I was in the moment as a little kid, loving this bike.
That's so cool, though. And it's always fascinating to me how our identities of a child or as a kid really are, they're not necessarily a reflection of who we are now, because there is growth, but yet those experiences define us. And even if you didn't have that creative nature, there was something happening that led you down this path that you constantly had that contention with. Now, was there somebody that you were around that demonstrated confidence, or that you looked up to in that successful, free-spirited way that you're like, oh, that is a glimpse of it? Maybe it was Judy Garland in Wizard of Oz. I don't know. But was there somebody that just, exuded that confidence that you desired to be as you grew up?
Well, what I do remember is my 8th grade teacher. And so I have to share the precursor story, because in 6th grade, I went to Catholic school, and in 6th grade, Sister Gertrude Marie did not like my handwriting. It wasn't cursive enough. It wasn't perfect enough. So I worked diligently every night to get it right. And then when I got her approval, I felt so good, but I didn't feel like it was me. I felt like I was trying to fit this mold. Well, 2 years later, my 8th grade teacher totally freed me. She felt like a free spirit, but she was really serious and really hardcore about what she taught. And I remember her saying, write however you want. And it gave me this freedom to just go with my own style. And I remember thinking, gosh, just the confidence that she had and the permission that I felt like I got from her to just do whatever. She goes, you can use styles that you like from this person or that person. And because I remember I really liked my sister-in-law's writing. So I wanted to copy some of that, but if I felt like I got my groove back or my flair back, even though I don't, I didn't feel like I ever really had it, but I felt like I was getting closer to being myself.
Your authentic self. It's so funny how handwriting really is a thing that I was very self-conscious of my writing. To this day, if I'm doing a facilitation, I will allow somebody else to come up and design the board, create it. My friends all had that bubbly, really beautiful, cutesy print.
Yeah, that wasn't me.
I looked like I was on the soccer field actively running while I was writing. I didn't get it. But I think that one person, that teacher that said, just go for it. They are the leaders that we need, the ones that see you have a uniqueness, and that's what's going to set you apart. If you could go back to your younger self in those moments, what is something you would love to help yourself, others, especially the women you work with now, unlearn about all those expectations that we're either given or put on ourselves?
Yeah. Gosh, the first thing that I would say at the heart is you are good enough. Or you are enough. Just you are enough, I would say would truly be enough. And that everybody else feels the same way as you.
Yeah.
Just the knowing that, wow, other people, I'm not alone, or just other people are trying to prove themselves just as much as you are.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I would say that feels like it's more of an adult thing, but nobody's really paying that much attention anyway.
It's really sad, right? I think we worry more about all the looks, the likes, the follows, the analytics, but yet everybody's looking at their own and everybody just wants to do better and be better. So if we could all just get out of that and understand the whole spotlight mentality that we all think the world revolves around us, right? It doesn't. And that when you realize that, there is a level of freedom that allows you to just be enough. You're good.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Are there, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say one other thing, thinking about farther back in my childhood, which is where I think some of this fear came up, is that when I was about 4 years old, my neighbors invited me to come over and play dress up. So as a 4-year-old, I thought, well, I'm going to go and play dress up, which in my mind meant, why would I need to wear clothes to them? So I left the house naked and immediately, they were laughing at people, like my neighbors, everybody's laughing at me. And I felt really confused as a kid, like, why would I wear clothes if I'm going to put them on?
Right.
In my brain, it made total sense.
Certainly.
But it's funny, that's one of those really prominent memories where I immediately had that societal expectation of, oh no, you can't do that. That's not okay. And then I'd say that was one of those sad moments that, again, I mean, if you think about it, like if you and I were somewhere and this little kid's running out naked, we probably would chuckle too. You don't know how those things impact people. But anyway, so I was thinking about that. Your question is really compelling about the creativity piece, because I felt so free. And why I'm bringing that up is because I remember I wasn't thinking in a good way. It was just, oh, great.
Yeah. You were going to your own, you were going to what called your spirit. And that is something that I really truly worry about in our society, that as we get older, we have lost so much, we've become very out of touch with the wonder and that instinctual feeling to be creative, to be imaginative, to just explore what our mind is thinking, not what society has taught us, trained us, and told us is expected of them. And I think that throughout our experiences, there are people along the way that have helped shake that notion and say, wait a minute, you've got something in you that, I want to let out, but not through the barrier of your handwriting has to be perfect, or not through the barrier of putting on a coat when you step out, or putting on pants. These little things have become assumed, norms or truly barriers to innovation. Along the pathway, as you evolved in corporate and moved in, especially into your entrepreneurial piece, how did different connections help inspire that within you to really call on your purpose? I mean, were there people that helped ignite your own confidence, so to speak?
Oh, for sure. Many people. I think about one of the first coaches that I hired. Her name was Michelle Lisenberry, and she was so encouraging. I remember that so much. And she would make me think differently. She just by asking questions that made me go, like I wouldn't have thought about it that way. And I will say that one of my strongest I don't know if you want to call it a talent, value, whatever, is connection. And I love connecting with people. I'm the person who still keeps in touch with people that I went to camp with as a grade school kid, or I'm the one that's continually like, hey, I haven't talked to you in a while. And so I'm often reconnecting with people and connecting with people in the moment as well. So I'd say that has been a really helpful thing with all these different people that I'm not afraid to ask questions. So just thinking about the different people that have spoken into my life, that have been mentors to me, and that is one thing that I learned from my dad, that you go after, like this, he used to always say, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. If you don't ask, you won't get. And so I've learned to leverage those connections as well, and not in a manipulative way, but just simply, hey, I know you know this. How, what can I learn from this? Or how can I also help you? Because I'm always trying to help other people as well.
Yeah. And when you lead with that best interest and curiosity, people see that. People see when it's authentic. When, as a connector, I love hearing stories from people. I love understanding who they were and who they want to be. And it becomes this web, like a beautiful spider web that everybody's really connected. And at the core is their purpose. At the core, we all have a purpose. We all have key drivers. It's just finding the right people that'll put us in front of somebody. And I think the biggest thing for myself has been understanding that it's okay to reach out to somebody. You don't have to go through 7 chains of command. If you have a connection or find an email address or happen to walk past somebody, speak up and say hello. And if the opportunity doesn't work out, it's okay. Don't take it personal. I mean, it's so easy to, but I think those are what create those next opportunities. And is there a situation where you interacted with somebody and it created a new moment, a new awareness that helped with your transition out of corporate and into your own entrepreneurial work?
Oh gosh. Yes. It's so fascinating because my old boss, I would say, was probably my greatest champion and my greatest challenger. And so it's interesting because it's not as if, like, she didn't officially know that I was quitting when I knew that I was quitting. So, but there was something really incredible about her continual support and challenge to me about speaking up over the years. So I was at that company for 14 years, and she always supported me in speaking up and saying, hey, we want to hear more from you, and that kind of thing, especially when I started there. And I think about how prominent that example was of encouragement. And then also some of the challenges that we had where I didn't know what I didn't know at the time. I didn't realize that there were some things that she did that triggered me, like my dad. And getting over that was a huge part of my freedom to be able to just, again, find my voice and trust it. It was more about trusting it. And so there was a defining moment that I think is really powerful to share, which is also in the opening of my book, where she had mentioned at a leadership meeting for, yeah, Karen, why don't we look at that? And it wasn't hardcore even of, you need to do this. That wasn't the kind of boss she was, but I felt it, I interpreted it as, your boss told you to do something and you better do it, even if you don't feel like it's what you think would be the best. So I'm sitting in this meeting, leading this meeting with all my peers and also people that are higher up than me at the company, but all of us are on the leadership team together. And I couldn't get the words out because I didn't feel aligned. And she had to shut down the meeting because of it. And it was so embarrassing, but she pulled me aside after and she goes, this was a perfect example where you didn't trust your gut. And she said, you could have just said, yeah, I'm not even sure why we decided to meet about this in the first place. Let's table this. And that freed me. The fact that she said, because I remember thinking, I could say that. I still remember that conversation so well. And she's the one that ended up saying it, shutting down the meeting. And then we never talked about that topic again. But that was a defining moment. And I would say that when I think about all the different ways that she's contributed to my growth, the fact that I wrote a book with that opening story as almost that pivotal moment that helped me to just go to town and say, I don't want to do that anymore. I'm over it. This is, I can't keep hiding, or I can't keep holding back anymore. I have to get past this feeling of needing people's approval to be able to say something. And I did a lot of personal growth work and such. And I will tell you, it is so liberating to be on the other side of that. So that whole, I would say it's more of, I know your original question was a person, and I'd say she was the person in part, but it was a whole situation and context that came together to make me realize, like, this is, and I can't keep doing this.
Yeah.
But yeah, beyond that, I can't think of any one person that really made like this massive impact before I left. I would say it was a combination of people that supported me. And ultimately, I would even go back to thinking about my kid self, like my authentic, true self that has always loved to be free and have this entrepreneurial spirit. That, okay, I'm doing this officially. And maybe I would even say it was Jess Ekstrom in the community, now that I think about it. Yeah.
That's definitely one that is very much a champion of hearing, making sure our voices get heard. And I would agree with that statement that it wasn't so much maybe a person, but it was the scenario. I think there are people that show up in our lives, and I had that reflection, that spark in my own thought as you said that, because there have been moments that I have questioned why I am experiencing something the way I am, or why someone is treating me the way they are when I am leading with the best intent and doing, in my mind, the best. And I think as much as I wanted to assume it, it's them, it's not me. It's really a scenario where we were not aligned, where maybe if it was a direct colleague, leadership wasn't aligned and we were being given individual tasks, and then suddenly we're colliding because our tasks are not even aligned under anything, not a common purpose, not a common project, but yet it creates this contention. I think there are moments with people where they're so set in their ways because of their learnings, their experiences, that it's not even an awareness to them the way they speak to people, or are possibly degrading and dismissive. One of my cringe phrases anymore is, "You're such a unicorn." If I hear one more person tell me I'm a unicorn, I don't know. And it sounds like such a compliment, and I used to love it. Problem is, one, I really do like to do everything, and that's exhausting at times, but it's the fact that when I was working with people that were so proudly, oh, we've got all these unicorns, what happened was I then became essentially manipulated to handle the tasks they didn't want to, because they said, "Ah, you're a unicorn. You could do this, figure this out for us." Months went by and I was never compensated for this unicorn work I was providing. And it was a lot. And it's, as much as I could be very frustrated with the people, I look back and I think I could have used a Karen. Finding my voice and understanding the power of speaking up with confidence and saying, I know I could do that, but is that in your best interest? When we're going out and supporting others with this type of work, we have to model it ourselves. So I think it's the scenarios that we place ourselves in that can really bring an awareness when we're willing to accept that we do have a little bit of play in it, and it's uncomfortable to own it, but it's powerful. And do you have a lot of women that you work with that you're able to guide through, provide tips, provide suggestions when those moments come and they're like, is it me? Is it them? What do I do?
Well, I have a really good story for that. That's where I missed an opportunity. And this is at my last job. So I was asked to be on the leadership team when we started restructuring a little bit. And I was so excited, and my boss said, well, absolutely, I need you on this team. And I said to her in a very passive way, so everybody else is a director above on the leadership team, and I'm a senior manager. What does that mean for me? And she goes, oh, yeah, we'll have to look at that. And she was distracted. She was in the middle of something on her computer. And the irony is that I thought that I asked at that point. And then a few months went by and I thought, she hasn't said anything. The leadership team is in full swing. I'm showing up every meeting. And then I brought it up to our COO, and there was kind of some hemming and hawing around it. And then my review came up. And we're sitting there, and at the end, so I was so disappointed that I didn't get promoted, which I expected was going to happen in that review. And she looked at me like she could tell something was off. And she goes, what's going on? And I said, well, I thought I was going to be promoted. And she said, what? She didn't even remember that conversation that we had. And I've been sitting there waiting. So the bottom line is, for anybody listening, ask directly. And she and I had a good chuckle about it, because I said, okay, if I had a do-over, I would have said, I want to be a senior director or whatever, director, whatever it was. And how do we make that happen? What's getting in the way? What can we do differently? And so after that review, we came up with a plan to help me get there. And yet it's fascinating to me, going back to what do we own and what do other people own? We've got to make it crystal clear and it's vulnerable to ask. I think that's why most people don't ask, because there's that fear of what if they say no? I mean, it's scary to say, I want to be this role when it's a level or two above you, and you never know what your boss is going to say. Yeah. So it feels safer to passively ask. And so the thing that I would say to anybody listening is to first just be aware. Are you actually making a direct ask, or is it passive? Because I coach some people sometimes where they'll go, well, I already asked. I said, well, what did you say?
Yes. Yes.
And we end up, even thinking about coaching men and women, I think over I've coached thousands of people at this stage in my career. And I can think about an exercise that I used to do in lots of my trainings, where we would do these 1-minute elevator pitches where you had to ask the person, and like, would you like to buy my product, or would you like to have a meeting? And it's so interesting, Katie, because we would record these. And before the recording, before we played it back, I would ask them, do you feel like you asked directly? And people would almost always say yes. And then we would watch it. And sometimes people would even say, well, I did, but no, they didn't. And then when we broke it down, I would say, here's what you said instead. You said things like, if you're interested, let me know. If you'd like to know more, I'd be happy to have a conversation. But the actual act of saying, would you like to schedule a call now? Or would you like to buy my product? It's small tweaks that make a huge difference, though.
Yes, I am doing a much better job of proofing my own messaging, because it is such a trap. And it's one where shifting from find a time that works for you, from do you think we could make a time work, or just those little adjustments, asking the open-ended questions. What do you think about this versus are you okay with that? There's those little pieces go a long way. And it's very scary at first, especially as you reference thinking about money. Is salary, income, financial. Do you find that to be one that is a common struggle, or is there something within your coaching that is a most frequent flyer as far as lack of confidence?
Well, I'm compelled to share an example related to money.
Yeah.
Because it was early on in my career. There was a guy, again, I always thought everybody was so much older and smarter than me for so many years. It's, I think the guy is probably not that much older than me, but number one, he was a guy, and number one, I thought he was older. So that was what was in my head.
And it's funny, those become metrics that we would assume somebody's status is by their knowledge, their content.
Totally.
What? Why would we do that? Oh. No offense to the older smart men, of course, but this really doesn't make sense.
Exactly. So I had known this guy for a while. He and I had met at different networking events, and I was probably in my late 20s, maybe early 30s. And I remember I was fundraising for something, and I thought, oh, he's got a company. He must have money. So I remember calling him and telling him about, hey, can we have a conversation about this? And at the very end of that, it was a short conversation, but I specifically said, Jerry, would you donate $100 or whatever it was. And he was kind of taken aback, and he kind of joked, but in an affirming way. And I had a good relationship with him. So it was really funny because he goes, wow, way to ask, right? You're like right there. And I will tell you, I'm proud of the fact that it never occurred to me that I wouldn't ask that way. Mm. But it was highlighted because of his reaction. And I'm also proud to say that I didn't sink down into a hole because he was sort of chuckling at me asking directly. But I would say it was a chuckle of surprise and also part admiration of, wow, okay, way to just put it out there. I think he said something like that, way to just put it out there. And then he did end up saying yes. But that was a really powerful learning younger in my career because I didn't know what I didn't know. Mm-hmm. And it taught me that, oh, that is a good thing. Now, in thinking about, okay, what is I love that frequent flyer. It's similar to what we've talked about already, just and were you asking more of what to do about it, or what's the frequent flyer problem?
Yeah. What would you say the problem is that most people mention?
Yeah, it's really about, well, I'd say it's two things, just to give something a little bit new to the conversation. But if we hadn't been talking about what we were talking about before, I would say it's the passive ask. People ask passively, but they think it's a direct ask. And that's the problem. They're not aware of it. So then it's, oh, how do I fix that? Well, I'm already asking. And then that's when, again, I like to do the recordings. I like to do role play. And then I see, oh, that's what you're doing. Like I had a senior director at Google say, people aren't responding to my emails and I'm asking things directly. And I said, well, let's look at some of your emails. So when I looked at some of her emails, I realized, oh, okay, let's change this up. First of all, they're too long and the subject line is too vague. We got to change that up. We got to make things more specific. So there were definitely some things that she could have done differently in that. But I would say that's the biggest thing is passive versus active. And then the other thing is people, particularly women, often don't negotiate in thinking about either salary negotiations if you're in a corporation or client gigs where we just, almost roll over like, oh, you can't afford what, oh, that's okay. Oh, here, let's just discount it by 50%. I mean, that's a little extreme, but it's the idea that we feel like, to me, it's the underlying belief that's the problem. We think we need to take what we get. Yeah. As opposed to either working out a creative solution, like you asked me at the very beginning of this conversation about the creativity aspect of me as a kid. I feel like I've really embraced my creativity in the last few years. Even doing some writing for somebody a few years ago, somebody said, well, hey, can you write this newsletter? And then when she gave me some feedback after the first one, she's like, I like it. I'm just wondering if you could be a little more use more of your creativity. And I honestly didn't even know what she meant. I just said, I've given you what I felt like I gave her the best that I had. And then her challenge to dive deeper into that felt scary to me. And then it occurred to me, writing is creative. Like, I mean, I know that sounds very, very funny, but to me, it really felt like, well, I'm writing for a purpose, not to be creative. But I really realized from that moment, that was almost the starting point of, oh, wow, I do have creativity around writing. And wow, I'm really creative with ideas and coming up with different ways that you can facilitate things. And the way I give talks, it's just, I'm really in the moment. I come up with good stories. And I never really thought about that as a strength.
Yes, it's absolutely a strength. And writing is something that I love doing, but it's also a very vulnerable space for me. I've journaled and written for years. And so as I shift into writing for other people or collaborating on books, I feel so exposed. But at the same time, it's been powerful for any of us in that writing space because I have to break people of the mindset that writing is a 5-step process. I was guilty of teaching it when I was an educator, and it drove me bonkers, to be quite honest. I would just completely scrap it. And some of the best work I would get from students was out of their just little journal that they could free write in. And some would write poetry, songs, stories. When they were able to release that creativity without barriers, without a rubric. Don't even get me started on the freaking rubrics. Like, we are stifling that. And as adults, it's really done a number on us. So I am so grateful that you are seeing that ability to tap back into your creativity, because it certainly needs to be unleashed for many more people. So thank you for leaning into it.
It's been really fun. And I would say, after leaving my corporate job, I for better or worse, and it's for better, but it's sad when I think about how trapped I felt without feeling trapped. I mean, I had an amazing job, traveled all over the world and all this, and spoke and taught people and learned myself. But it's fascinating to me how much my world has opened up after leaving there.
Yes.
And at first there was quite an adjustment of, wow, there's a lot of good people. I mean, we were a very premier company. So in my mind, I really felt like kind of, there was sort of a very ignorant and also, just mindset of, we were the best and there isn't much competition. Not to say that, I believe that the world is full of abundance, but when you think about it, there's a lot of people that do all the different things in the world. Like, there's not one person that is the only person that does something. So that was a huge learning for me, but also really freed up my brain as well as my creativity to just do what I wanted. Like, the buck stops with me, with clients, with my team, all of that. It's really, really cool.
Yeah, I think that's very, very powerful to say that when you stepped away, you had that awareness. I know, especially over the last 2 years, as a lot of people have either had to make a change because of layoffs or, companies closing, they look to the big corporations as the model, the guide, the Disneys, the Googles. They're wanting to emulate what they've done, and they do it very well, but they do it because it works within their purpose. And I have really enjoyed getting to know some of the leaders that have left those organizations, because as brilliant as they are, they have stepped back and gone, whoa, here I thought we were doing it the be all end all way and was ready to go out and teach the world on that. And now I'm realizing there's so many ways I need to learn. And it's been a really powerful shift for people to recognize the silos we get stuck in, and that there's that abundance of opportunities. So really cool.
So
now,
true.
I want to make sure that we wrap up with something. And this is a quote that I pulled from you from something you've said in conversation when we had the call, when you invited us, several of the speaker sisters, in to learn more about your journey. But you've said, if you're not fueled up, you're not going to be able to be there for other people. And we'll pull on the frequent flyers airplane shtick here. But I think that putting your oxygen mask on first is so powerful. So I want to celebrate you and just make sure I round out my 3 pillars: connect, create, and celebrate, to say thank you for helping women find their voice, to recognize that it's okay to fuel yourself and to use that fuel to speak up for yourself. So what is something, not is there, what is something else about you? But see, I'm working on it. I'm working on that shift, right? Live in action. What is something that you really need to celebrate for yourself about Karen? So you are now reflecting on your own journey, and give yourself a pat on the back, because we don't do that enough. So what can we celebrate along your journey with you?
Oh, wow. It's making the very incredibly uncomfortable ask for Donald Miller to endorse my book. And when he said the kindest way possible, no, that he doesn't even do it for friends, but that he would do me one better and have me on his podcast. The fact that I want everybody listening to know that it was very uncomfortable for me to ask, because I have so much respect for him. It just felt awkward to ask that. And I don't know him very well. I just happened to be at his workshop a couple of times. And what came out of that ask, to me, it's the reaping of the benefits of making that, what do I want to say? The having the courage to speak up. That's really what it comes back to. At the end of the day, it's the courage to speak up. You may not get what you want, but you might get something even better. And he was right. Like, I don't necessarily, as much as I'd love his endorsement of my book, I didn't need that. What I need is more visibility. And that's what he gave me. But it started with me. So I'm celebrating that I had the courage to ask, because I spent a lot of time thinking, I got to do this, but I'm so uncomfortable. But I knew I had to. It just, everything in my body said, you got to ask.
Yes. Thank you for not just sharing that, but for sharing that you were given a no, because hello, people, it happens. We get told no, but when you take that no, listen for what else comes out of it, because it's very rarely no, door closed forever. So that is a powerful celebration, and I couldn't be more grateful to have you with us. So Karen, where can more people find you? I know you've got your podcast. Tell us all the ways people can connect further.
Yeah, well, I'll say 2 ways. My website gives you all the ways. So KarenLaos.com. Karen, KarenLaos.com. And my podcast is called Ignite Your Confidence. Oh, and my book. That's another celebration.
Right, let's casually mention that.
Yes, I tend to forget that. It's like you check off something and you go, okay, what's next? But I just published that in June, and it's called Trust Your Own Voice, Growing Your Influence Through Confident Communication. And that's available on Amazon.
I love it. So very exciting. I cannot wait. I'm so grateful to know a Karen that is completely busting the nonsensical definition in society of a Karen. You are everything that is not. So thank you for being a rock star. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you, Katie.
Is she not just incredible? Way to be awesome, Karen. Thank you for joining, and thank you all for tuning in to yet another conversation with an innovator and somebody that was able to embrace that spark. And I encourage you to continue doing the same. Make sure to share this episode with anybody that you think it might really resonate, that's looking to find that unshakable confidence as they transition their career. And if you are looking to transition into podcasting, hey, I have a fun little treat for you. I put together 7 tools and tips that I have found helpful as I work on connecting stories throughout this platform, and I have included it in the show notes for you. So make sure to check it out. Let me know what you think. And as always, be well, stay curious, and I'll see you real soon.
Point of fact, Romans used to use honey as taxes.
Later, Tater.